All right, guys, so we got some form and setup tips here for a lat biased row. So anytime you see like a lat biased forward lean row like you're gonna have here, it's always going to be in some sort of machine. You could technically do this with cables, but what you really need to have happening is obviously a seat and a chest support to actually do the forward lean row properly. So a couple things I'm gonna go over with setup before I have Cody hop in and demo. First and foremost, what is the point of this? The point is really to try and do a row that is biasing the lats. So again, of course, some other upper back stuff is going to work. Traps are going to work. Rear delts are going to work. But as opposed to focusing on the shoulder blades moving as much as possible, as opposed to focusing on driving the elbows back as much as possible, we're trying to put ourselves in a position to let the lats work as much as possible. And again, thinking about the lats function as you row is they're really pulling down. So they're pulling the upper arm, in turn the shoulder blade and the scapula down the whole time, as opposed to focusing on back. If I go more towards back, that's going to be more rear delts, upper back stuff, where if the focus is that upper arm pulling down the whole time, arguably you're going to get a lot more lats involved. So everything we're doing with this setup is to try and support more of that kind of down pull. So as the forward lean would indicate, Cody's going to be in here basically instead of this upright position, imagine this is the spine of the torso, it's going to be more of a forward lean. And so what that would do is if you're imagining me do a row, if I forward lean, this is basically what's happening, which is another way of looking like everything going like this. So it's almost more like moving your body to have a high row as opposed to actually not having something high to pull down. So anytime you're pulling more kind of in this direction, you're going to bias the stuff that's below the shoulder joint as opposed to something that supports more of this shruggy type up back motion. So as far as setup goes, that's the main reason that you're leaned forward, is to almost turn it into a normal, this would be kind of like a flat horizontal row into more of a high row type motion. Secondarily, it's also going to have you giving your chest pushed into the pad without really having an option of extending back. If you have more contact through the lower ribs or the stomach on the pad, you can back extend off of the machine as you're going, where we're going to be leaned forward far enough so there's really only one contact point towards the upper portion of the chest. And the thing that is, obviously, if you're pressed into there, you can't pull off of it. So you have to stay in that position the whole time. And then the focus too, I found if you have that forward lean, I'm going to cue Cody and I'm going to obviously go through this as you're going. The whole time is feel like you're pulling down. So it helps get away from this notion of trying to pull back as far as you can, which happens with a lot of other rows, and gives you more focus on kind of that downward motion, which again, I think would help with lats. And the last little tip I'll give here, for the most part for setup, again, every machine's going to be a little bit different, but you want something with a shoulder-ish width grip. So again, this is a great piece of the Prime here just because it's got these movable handles. But for most everything, you would want a shoulder-ish width grip or slightly outside. If you're going too narrow, you're actually going to limit your range of motion a little bit. And if you go too wide, potentially, it's going to have to force those elbows to flare, in which case that lat can't really fully contract. So shoulder-ish width. And aside from that, put the seat always on the higher side as opposed to the lower side. If you imagine me sitting in the seat, as I go higher up, basically relatively speaking, my hands are lower, which is going to promote them being more down here to the finish, which is good for any row. Where if I put the seat lower, then that's basically going to move my body lower, which puts the hands higher, and it would promote more of this bicep-y row type thing. So lots of times people see me do this. I put the seat up high, and I'll get taller guys that train with me, be like, oh, I'll put it down lower because I'm tall. No, really the goal of it is obviously so your body is up higher. So again, if the handles really don't move up and down, these obviously do a little bit, but the plane they're moving on stays pretty much the same. We're moving that lower. So again, we're having the handles finish lower towards kind of our stomach or more towards our hips, which is a good position for any lat bias row. So Cody's going to hop in. I'm just going to give a couple more cues to follow here. We'll come around this side while he's going. So you see basically on anything that you've got seat, hips pretty much all the way towards the back of the seat. He's got kind of his upper chest on there. If anything, I don't want you too extended on this. If anything, just kind of a nice neutral spine. You can really mess around with it. Some people feel their lats pretty good when they're actually a little flexed. Some people feel good neutral. The teeniest bit of extension isn't bad. You just don't really want to be in this type of position. So I'm going to have Cody grab the handles. Can reach them. And so the big thing to start with here to initiate the motion is I always think I cue people a lot. I'll put my hands on someone's upper arm and say start by pushing your upper arm down. So not thinking about the handles going back or the hands back. Feel like you're driving that upper arm down. So as he lets everything out, everything kind of protract, pull forward, drive down first. And then for the finish, focus on jamming your tricep into the side of your lat. So that's the end. If Cody wanted to, he could drive that elbow way further back. But when that lat fully contracts or fully shortens, remember the lats kind of go this way, so that upper arm needs to jam in at the side as opposed to pulling hard back. So again, same as everything else. Go one more rep here, nice, slow, eccentric. Feel that lat stretch. Let the shoulder blades go forward. Feel like you're driving down from that upper arm first. The upper arm, the traps, or excuse me, the scapula will just come along with it. Drive and squeeze those hard. And again, the last cue that I always give, feeling like you're smashing your tricep into your lat can be a great way to finish. Or even feel like you're trying to wrap your elbows around your back here. That'll be another thing, as opposed to driving this way and going as far back as you can. If you're thinking kind of down and around, that will really give a good hard lat contraction as well too. So again, just going over setup again, the whole point of this whole deal is something to help bias lats more. In general, because when you bias lats, we're trying to use less of other stuff. You'll generally use a little bit less weight here than maybe you would normally a typical horizontal row, but because more of the weight is going to one specific muscle as opposed to distributed over more muscles. So again, you want something with the seat, chest pad, lean forward. Again, maybe that angle you're lean forward, 15, 20 degrees, doesn't have to be exact. Find a contact point on the pad, keep it there the whole time, keep your hips slid back, shoulder width grip. And then from there, the big thing is feeling, again, if you imagine that lat's just a string that pulls down, let it pull that upper arm down first, finish with that upper arm smash into the side. And then same as every other exercise, just nice controlled tempo, even pace, and just make sure obviously you're using your muscles and not momentum.